Dude, keep going for a few minutes. Let people join. Go for
Yeah,
a couple of minutes on that.
sure. All right.
Nice. That was awesome. That I had you playing on here, and I also had, because we're now streaming on YouTube. Hello, people on YouTube. That started playing, and I couldn't find the window to close it, so I had you like doing a duet, and it was pretty fun. Right,
Sweet.
right, everyone. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for being lovely and prompt and on time. A lot of you guys will probably know me and the company and Guitar Vivo from some of our jazz books or our blues books. This is something wonderfully different, which I think is going to blow some minds today. This is a podcast that I've been doing with with Bryan Baker, who you just heard. Who I kind of gave you a brief description of in the email. Those of you that saw that, we won't go too much into Bryan's history today or anything like that, because we actually have this podcast and we have a whole bio episode coming out. So we'll save that. Today, we are talking about fretboard philosophy. And I think I just threw this title on you because I thought this is what, from talking to you guys all the time, everyone seems to be interested in. So I will, that's kind of everything admin wise. If you guys have any questions, you just whack them in Zoom or on YouTube, wherever you are. Just type them as you go. I'll keep track of them and I'll feed them to Bryan whenever we get a chance. And what we'll also do is at the end, we will maybe, once you finish kind of flowing and riffing, stop and do another stock take. And if there are any questions, guys, please take advantage of this. It's a unique opportunity. Right, Bryan, fretboard philosophy. I'm just going to throw you in it.
All right. So I want to say right off the bat that different from the other streams you've done, I think let's do like the chat in the moment. So if you have a thought out there, type it up and we'll address it ASAP. Because I don't want to I have a tendency to kind of do a little bit of to digress into like long tangents. And so if you ask a question that's pertinent to like what I'm talking about in the moment, and then I'm like, I go off into some nether region of something that doesn't pertain to what you asked for, then we have to circle back to it later. So Luke, just like, jump on top of those things. And when they come up, let's just address them when we can. Okay, so fretboard philosophy. Well, we have to. Okay, so I think the best way to start this is to talk about Google Maps, and that's going to make sense in a bit. But so most of you out there are going to use Google Maps for whatever it is. You're trying to get to your job. You're trying to get to see where the traffic isn't for you to get to X place, to do Y thing, to achieve Z goal. You're going to use Google Maps in your life, right? I hate Google Maps. I never use it because I don't like machines telling me where to go. I read maps, and if I get lost, great. I just moved to a new town, and I've been getting lost purposely every day for about an hour so I can figure out things out for myself over time. But I understand why people use it, and I get the luxury of it, and I myself used it for many years. But when you use Google Maps to get to a place, you haven't gotten to the place. Google Maps has gotten to the place, and you have followed it. Right? So to think that, like, this is how you can kind of end up, like, let's imagine you live in New York, or you live in London, or you live in a large city, and you've used Google Maps for walking directions. You've used Google Maps to get to a place. You get to the place, and you don't even really know how you got there. You've just arrived at a destination. You followed a thing to get there. You haven't really gotten there. Because to go to a place involves like a cognitive process, and if your brain is disconnected from the result and you're just kind of following directions, you, like this, like the objective you, the objective I of you, aren't really doing anything. You have been subtracted, and your body is just kind of doing the thing, right? So all of that is to say, for me, scales, and by scales, we have to separate two things here. There are scales, which are a succession of notes that make a ostensibly logical progression of sounds, and then there are scale positions. Okay. Scale positions, to me, are Google Maps. It's the Google Maps of music, which is to say, you look at a chart, it says C major, you're studying a tune, you're listening to a tune, you know it's C major, someone tells you a chord progression, they say this is C major. Let me say right off the bat also today that a lot of what we're talking about today is applicable in an improvisational sense. If we're talking compositionally, and if you guys have compositional questions, throw them at me. There's a little bit of a different application there. This we're talking more in an improvisational way, although this will apply clearly to composition as well. So again, if you have questions pertaining to that, throw them at me. So the issue, you say you see C major, right? You're looking at a chart, it says C major. Someone says, hey man, here's my tune, C major, blank, 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 whatever. This tune's in C, say, right? Play a solo, it's in C. Now, the problem with orientating yourself with regard to scale positions on a fretboard, right, is that C major becomes a thing. It becomes an object. It becomes a succession of physical movements. It becomes this. Or whatever position you happen to be playing in, right? So C major is no longer a vehicle with which you would construct melodies. It instead becomes just a simple tool. It becomes Google Maps. And so you yourself instantly subtract from the situation and you play the object, right? And granted, you might have practiced a whole succession, a whole series, a whole slew, a plethora, a myriad, take your word, of various manipulations of that object. But nonetheless, when you think of C major, 8th fret, your brain goes right to the 8th fret. It goes right to the 3rd fret. It goes right to relative minor, whatever your thing is, right? And my contention is that that's not really fretboard knowledge. Just like Google Maps is not really getting around to your job or getting around to your grandmother's house or getting around to your girlfriend's house or whatever, right? That's not really getting to a place. Because you're not really... It's like a scale position. What I hope I can get you guys to think about today is that imagine scale positions kind of like a little micro dose of science, right? A scale position makes the claim that here, if only you do this thing with this little tool, then this otherwise unknowable thing becomes known. So if you want to take the chaotic, entropic, mysterious realm of music and you want to know it, well, here's a tool. Here's a little bit of science. Just like, the clouds are made up of X amount of water vapor versus X amount of air pressure. Okay. So if you're sitting on the grass and you notice the shape of a rabbit in the clouds, does this knowing its chemical makeup do anything to describe that experience for you? Has the little bit of science you've learned to describe the thing told you anything? Just like, does the scale position, what does it help you achieve really? If not a kind of like sub-reality, a sort of like, well, if I can't really play a melody, then at least I can play this thing. At least I can use the object to an end, right? So like, again, Google Maps, right? If you can't, we as humans have the ability to navigate the world. You should be able to like go to the corner of your house and someone should say, the grocery store is east. And you should be able to, theoretically of course, you should be able to climb up the top of your house and literally go from roof to roof to the grocery store because you just know where east is. And you've been to the grocery store enough times, or someone gives you landmarks and you can orient yourself. You shouldn't need to like go to the streets and someone say, turn left after the stop. These are tools. And these are mechanisms that over time kind of build illusion on top of illusion to where you just get lost in the world. And at a certain point you find yourself being like, I spend most of my day going around the world in which I actually inhabit completely unaware of where I'm going, because I'm just using this thing, this tool, this device that's saying, turn left at the stop sign. And I say, okay, I'm gonna do it, without any thought about it. So similar to let's say you take a chart and it says C major, B flat major, A flat major, A major, B major, okay? Just a nothing chord progression. Just a nonsense chord progression. Now, if I were to have one bar each of that progression, you're going to play scale positions through all that, because that's what you've learned. Now, if that isn't your default impulse, congratulations, you're on your step one toward the red pilling of this experience. But most of you guys out there are going to have the thing, okay, C and then B flat and then A flat and then A and then B, and let me use the tools that I've been given to navigate this process, right? Like, this is a hammer. C major is a hammer, and B flat major are the nails, and A flat major is the ruler, and these are things you're going to do to build the proverbial house of this solo you're trying to construct, or the melody you're trying to construct. My contention is that if you get outside of position, this becomes something you can play this through. That's a whole different way of navigating harmony. And doesn't involve, we're all taught that like giant steps is the pinnacle of soloing in an improvisational context. Guys, giant steps is the biggest steaming pile of dog shit on the planet, okay? It is nothing but a succession of scales after scales after scales played in position. Even the most flagrantly absurd classical etude designed to let 14-year-old violin students get better at their upper G string work is more musical than giant steps. So for all of you out there that have this canonical worship of it's not music, it's nonsense. It's difficult, okay, great, but so is, I don't know. Just because something's difficult doesn't make it valid or good or interesting, right? So, because again, what are we after here? We're after playing melody. And in order to have an understanding of the fretboard, we have to think that understanding the fretboard is not understanding scales on the fretboard. It's understanding music on the fretboard, music through the fretboard, right? So, step one toward this process, which Mick Goodrick, when I was a student at Berkeley, really, really young dude, Mick Goodrick had this thing he would do where he'd he'd break out a pocket knife whenever you would make a mistake in class. Kind of, they didn't ever say it, but like the kind of the tacit inference was like he's going to cut your fingers off or something, And so whenever you would play a scale position, he would break the pocket knife out and go, oh, pay attention, oh, trying to say, I don't want to see any like linear Pat Martino sort of stuff. He wanted you to always play across the fretboard, right? So we have C major. First thing he would do is do these single note scales with one finger. Now it seems obvious, but if you limit yourself to just that, say just C major, G string, that's it. What kind of melodies can you make from that? This is why everyone loves the human voice. Because the human voice is not burdened, as we are, as string players are, as pianists are, with the ability to visually orient themselves in the world of scalar representation, right? So we have a kind of curse. Firstly, that our instrument is built in these box shapes. Secondly, that the scales that we play on our instrument fit quite well into these box shapes. And so when somebody, for example, guys, someone says, "Here's my tune. It's in C major. Play," or even like, "Here's a groove." Now, I assure you, you guys are still you're going to think in C major shapes or A minor shapes or first position, potentially third fret G-ish shapes, but you're thinking shape-wise. You're not thinking, which is a line like that is what a singer would sing. Because again, a singer, it's almost as though every vocalist, save for the really, really, really talented sort of scat singers, the really talented operatic singers, they exist in a world where Google Maps is prohibited to them. There's a ban on iPhones for singers. They can't access this navigation device. And so due to that, they are, imagine if like someone told you, "Hey man, you can't go to the grocery store. You can't go to Vaughn's, Kroger, Primark, whatever. You can't go. Carrefour, whatever the store is in your town. You just can't go." Well, you have a couple of choices. First, barter, trade, potentially, but that won't last very long. Die, or learn to grow your own food. And in learning to grow your own food, you would connect with the long ontological chain of what it is to be a human being by feeding yourself. The singer, because they don't have the tool, they literally don't have the physical ability to visual. They can't like take out their esophagus and like write notes on it. It's an abstraction. There's no way to visually represent the voice. And so because of that, they don't have the ability to get locked into these systems as strongly as we do and can. And so scales are a very different thing to a singer than they are to us. Again, to us, they are things. And so when you're learning quote unquote fretboard knowledge, oftentimes what people do is they learn a bunch of things and they organize them. And so when someone says, "Okay, here are blank, 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 blank," and you say, "Okay, I'm going to use this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing on those things." Things and things, materials and materials. And then you have, then you have giant steps, which is difficult to do. Yeah, for sure, guys. It's difficult. It's also difficult to build a hydrogen bomb. Is it good? Difficulty and quality are things that we should not, conflate. They are fundamentally different things. They are diametrically opposed things, in fact. Oftentimes, things that are difficult are not automatically good. Sometimes they're wonderfully good. It's very difficult to be a virtuous human being. That's good. It's also very difficult to force yourself to be an immoral human being. That's bad. Just because something is good because something is difficult doesn't make it good. So, yes, it's difficult to play 1,000,000 scale positions over 1,000,000 chord changes. So what? That isn't fretboard knowledge. Again, the ability to know that can be navigated with is far more knowledge than knowing that's this is a question of what's called epistemic theory, or epistemology is the study of knowledge, right? So there are many kinds of knowing. So if you know scales in their positions on the fretboard, that's a kind of knowing, just like using Google Maps to get to your grandma's house is a kind of getting, a kind of voyaging, a kind of traveling, but it's not actually doing it. It's mediated by a thing. And in this case, the position is the thing, because when you think of the notes you need to play, you're thinking of the position first, not the notes. So to me, when I hear C major, I'm just starting, my first thought is just E. That's all I think about. If someone says, this tune's in C major, go. My first thought is, okay, I'm on the third. Cool. Now, my next decision is going to strictly be predicated on what it is I hear in my head. And usually that's going to start rhythmically and not harmonically. So I'm hearing da-da-do-da-da. I'll navigate that way, right? Now, for those of you that this is already going over your head, let me rein it in a little bit. Because you're going to say, okay, you played this phrase. Why did you make those particular choices physically? Because you're playing in a scale position. Okay, great, you're right, I am. Because again, the object that we're talking about, those objects are designed with the non-material in mind. It's like, you're again, to use the Google Maps reference, your car is made of things. Your car is a thing made of things. When you look at your car, you think about the car, you don't think about the iron alloy that makes the doors. I'm trying to get us to think about the material in the thing. So to see a car not as a car, but as a shaped, melded version of iron alloy. And to think more about what the thing is made out of, not so much the thing. So, because if we don't understand why scale, if we don't understand what's inside the position of the scale, we're just trapped into the boxes, always. And this is why your playing gets to a point to where, once you master the box, where else do you go from there?
So someone was asked, when you say inside the position of the scale, knowing inside the position of the scale, do you mean knowing what the intervals are, or do you mean knowing what the sounds of everywhere on the fretboard is?
Great question. That's a question that is hard to... In my case, it's an interval answer, but that will be up to the individual in the end, because you might find that your sensibilities connect more to just simple linear melodic shapes and not intervals as much. My sensibilities it's always very rhythmically biased, so I always first kind of let rhythms decide where my notes go. Which is to say, I'm certainly never deciding, another problem with shapes as in quotes fretboard knowledge is that it has a kind of tyrannical quality similar to Google Maps, in that it's doing the deciding for you. You can't really if you're thinking very position oriented, you're not really making choices. You're just kind of deciding through options. right? There's a fundamental difference between saying, okay, I know where all of the notes that are in C major are on my fretboard, and I can choose them, D. I can make choices that are not limited to these kind of tyrannical structures which say, well, here are the three things you can have for lunch today. It's like the for those of you that have read 1984, it's like the cafeteria counter that Winston goes to, where it's like, do you want the gruel coffee, or do you want the cigarettes where the tobacco falls out, or do you want the shitty oatmeal that we've got for you? Like which choice? They're all great, aren't they? And it's like, okay, sure. So there's not real, there's a forever choice, I think, to be thinking about when your goal is to kind of unpack some of the knowledge, the epistemic truth, in quotes, you've been given by the education system or those that have, or even your own learning, frankly. And some of that reality is to realize that, like, not all education is designed around choice. Some education is designed around limiting options. And so what I think the church system, which is effectively what we're learning here or we've all learned in the traditional kind of tonal, scalar, modal sense, the church system was really like needed to corral music into a knowable thing. It couldn't tolerate like there being all these folk scales and these folk melodies and these ways of delineating time and meter, and that was dependent upon like if you walked 20 miles north or south or east or west. That was just like, in a very kind of churchy way, that was just intolerable for the monks of medieval Europe to like, no, there must be homogeneity. The world must be knowable and it must be the same. And due to that, we have this like, there's a benefit to that. I mean, I can go to Nepal tomorrow and talk about the C major scale with someone that plays guitar on the street. Okay. But something's definitely lost there as well. And like any epistemic system, some of the things that we lose are the people that are involved, and we talked about this in our previous streams, where my goal is always to get the individual musician out of the person the most. So I want all you guys to sound like you guys. I don't want you guys to sound like anyone else, whether it's the guy next door to you, whether it's like Rosenwinkel or Krantz or Frederick Thorndal or Tosin Abasi or whatever. I don't want anybody to sound like anybody else. I want everyone to be who they are artistically, because I think the artistic world is the most fertile that it can possibly be if everyone's doing that, or trying at least to do it. And so while these positions help us to like disseminate music and help us to discuss music, because we're discussing them today, they also, it's I just moved to the Mojave Desert, and right outside my door are millions of trails, right? And I have this kind of itch where whenever I'm on a trail, I even find the trail to be kind of like an authoritarian system in my life. Even the trail is kind of like, here's where you should go. And I'm like, fuck you, trail. I don't know. I'm going to go off of you just because you're there. Maybe that's a thing that I have in I'm just like, that's my sensibility, and I'm just wired that way and born that way. And I look at everything like that. But I think there's nothing wrong with at least, having that little angel or devil, depending on how you see it, on your shoulder, saying, hey, hold on. Maybe are you too locked in? Have you stopped thinking? That's the real question here. Is the thing you're engaging in stopping you from thinking? Is it Google Mapsing you, right? Are you just walking along the trail kind of like, kind of brain dead, and you like realize you don't know where you are anymore? Because the problem with trails, like Google Maps, is that you can kind of just idly be on them and then be lost Whereas if you're not on a trail, you have to always think, here's where I am, here's where I'm going, where do I want to be, how do I want to get there, where have I been, turn around, where this, I don't want to get lost with it. You have to constantly be aware of you in the world acting. And, you know, man, I mean, we've all been to jazz clubs or been to any venue listening to solos, listening to these mindless solos. You know, these lobotomizing, just, you know, I don't even know what you'd call it. It's like confetti or something. Just sound, just kind of going in the air, right? Go ahead, man.
It's kind of funny because we've spoken on our podcast before, on the podcast, about your experience when you're performing and how you know, kind of are looking to transcend and that, and you come off stage and you might not remember anything that you've even played.
Right.
But on the other side of that, I think lots of us here, and I'd be interested for you guys to chime in on this if this is the case, we've all kind of played solos and then kind of been like, I don't even know what I played. But just because it's like that trail thing of, I've not had to think about anything, I've just gone from A to B and my fingers know what that means.
Right.
And that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, that is what yeah. So, because if you're going from A to B and you're playing and it sounds good, people like it, the audience is digging it, there's no real reason for you to question the thing other than you're not engaged. And, you know, I mean, man, look, like you could give me a riff and I could do that forever. Just mindlessly do that. So I know the temptation, and look, I understand that the temptation is there. I mean, we're human beings, right? So we're tool creators and we're tool users because there's a dual side of our nature, which is that we only really reach the highest form of ourselves when we struggle, but we don't want to struggle. We like want to sit back and enjoy the barbecue and drink the beer and chill and hang with our friends and like watch TV. We don't want to struggle because we're also like, because struggle sucks. But also, we can't be the truest versions of what our, you know, teleology is without struggling. Struggle is necessary to be, I think, like an actual present, really alive human being. And so due to that, the temptation is always present to say, oh, fuck it, man. Just like chill, dude. You know, Netflix and chill, man. Our era is full of this. This is all this era is. It's just, why feel pain? Why feel struggle? Why feel hardship? Why? Just like check out, people dig it. Who cares, man? You know? People like your blues spins and like fucking great. Keep doing them, man. People like it. Who cares? Like this is the you know, the geist of the day. The zeitgeist, to use the really Hegelian term. And, you know, the problem though is that if that's what works, that doesn't mean that it actually, capital W, works. It just means that it functions, right? Again, Giant Steps functions perfectly. It's a perfectly running machine. It's just a robot that it's a Roomba that smashes itself into the corner of your room. You know, it doesn't have a like, there's no beauty to it. There's no, you know, why is it even happening? You know, like what's the fucking point of Giant Steps? Why is it there? Why does it exist? What good is it to anyone other than as this, like, you know, oof, that's interesting. It's like a robot you've created to like, you know, stand on the top of a mountain and speak to no one or something. It's just this thing that's been created with no real reasoning behind it, other than that it's created. Okay, that's pretty odd thing to do. Whereas, you know, if you're the kind of the mindless temptation thing, the way to get out of that is to realize that, firstly, the person you're most beholden to in an artistic process is you. And you should want to feel something special every time you play, something transcendent every time you play, something interesting every time you play. Even if it's like, you know, let's say like that's your tune you're going to solo over, right? Now, what's to stop you from like some of that scale position, okay? Some of it's not. The important thing to like, the problem with the first stage of thinking like this is that you're naturally going to think, okay, I'll never play a scale position again. That's not true. You just will play scale positions that you don't think of as scale positions. The key is the mind. Like so much of this process, the key is not seeing C major and thinking right to the 8th fret, or right to the 5th fret, or right to the 3rd fret, or right to your. That's the point. Getting rid of the automatic response, right? Like you sit in your car, Google Maps, like that sort of thing. The auto response is the thing we're trying to like chisel out of the process. And the stepping back, you walk on a trail. Why? Because it's there? That's not a fucking reason. That's not a reason. Like, maybe it's the best option. Okay. Maybe because on the other side of you is like imminent death. In that case, good choice. Stay on the trail. But just because it's there doesn't mean it's the right choice. Just because the scale exists in that position doesn't mean that's the way to do it. And this is if we can all just think a little bit more skeptically about epistemic systems, about knowledge, and realize that just because you know all of your quote unquote positions on the fretboard doesn't mean you know the fretboard. It just means you know you've learned very correctly how to use Google Maps. Because imagine if I like tuned all your strings to different tunings. Then what? Now you've got your phone is gone. Your maps are gone. Now you can't navigate. Like I won't even do it in tune. Let's try, no matter, like that is an out of tune guitar, right? Even that shouldn't stop you from finding a way, and maybe that's a good thing to practice. I mean, I think it was Rosenwinkel did this, like on the Next Step record, where he tuned everything to like some random tuning because he just got bored with the epistemic system that he had in his life. He realized he'd hit a wall with the positions, and so because he's a very analytical dude, he needed to find new positions to find new music, whereas my solution would just be to say, well, just stop thinking about positions and think about the voice. Make yourself a voice, right? So now the next question is, how do we do this? Right? How do we unpack a system that's so wired in, and also necessary as well? Because that's not like this. Certain kind of knowledge systems have a point to a point, but then that point can become a hurdle, right? Like, and let's think of let's take science for example, right? Like science does explain aspects of the known world, but if your knowledge and your study of science doesn't continue on into like physics or quantum physics or whatever, then you've ceased to seek explanations, and now are seeking, or you've ceased to find truth and now are seeking explanations. So, because what you find, like when scientists get into string theory and quantum mechanics and all this sort of stuff, is that all the explanations of the earlier science are now no longer applicable. Talk to a physicist about something like, time, and he'll say, well, there's no explanation for that. It's like beakers and test tubes are kind of level 1 science, and then you get to level 10 science, and it's like, well, the beaker is not even real. Okay, so if you stay into level 1 science, everything's explicable. Like, great, there's beakers and liquids and fire and and the vapor and the thing, and I can write it down, I notate it, and you powder your wig some more, and you put your thing on, and it's all the world is very knowable, very Enlightenment era, very Rousseauian, Blaise Pascal, Diderot, very French. But if you keep going down the epistemic rabbit hole, right, you get to, Morpheus, right? Morpheus in the leather jacket. And what you find at the end of that is that, like, okay, well, it becomes kind of almost a Buddhist thing of, someone said here, Hank Smith said, follow the song, not the scale. Exactly. right? So we could even actually look at this, and that's a good thing to say because that kind of points me in an interesting direction. We can actually even think of fretboard knowledge is actually not on the fretboard. Fretboard knowledge is external. Fretboard knowledge is the thing you are playing. The knowledge you want is what can happen on the fretboard to the thing that you're playing. That's knowledge of the fretboard. What needs to happen externally, and then using the knowledge that you have to achieve that musical end. But the end always being music, of course, right? And if you look at the external, similar like then, this is like a thing that like, Christian theology is always talking about. People feel dark and miserable. You look outside yourself. Go do something charitable, right? Go work at a soup kitchen. Go fucking, save an animal at a shelter. Go take care of a dog. Go help a bird to not be falling from a tree. Go do something external. Because you get into this endless internal loop of like me, what can I do? What should I feel? What is the greatest thing for me? You get into and it's just this rabbit wheel of never ending cannibalizing kind of force, where musically there's no different here. What can I do? What should I play? What are the things that I can manipulate? When in reality, you're doing all this stuff on a thing, to a thing, with a thing. And that thing is a song. Now, the next question to ask is, have you constructed a song to benefit your expertise? Are you Joe Satriani surfing with the alien? Because if that's the case, then you have a real, like, pure narcissistic loop where you've created a thing to benefit your thinking of yourself. And then that's like, look, I liked Joe Satriani when I was 12, but that's a real pointless exercise. That is a true emperor's wearing, emperor's no clothes, look at yourself in a hall of mirrors kind of thing. And I'm sure Joe Satriani is a nice guy, but, at this point he probably has a lot of mortgages on houses to pay, and, it's not really making
that's the giant steps thing in a nutshell though, right?
Yeah, Coltrane is a unique example because, taking that point further, Coltrane basically realized all of this shit on his own anyway. You go from the kind of the Blue Train era all the way to interstellar space. And that's about mid-50s to, like, I think, 63, 64, early mid-60s. So it's a 10-year period of time, which is a huge, huge creative, process to go through. You find he did that anyway. You've got epistemic knowledge that is granted. So Blue Train is hard bop. Okay, this is what you do to play jazz saxophone. And he wasn't thinking, right? Then it's like, well, fuck that. I want to push further. I have a spiritual yearning that was like, I need more. But he was still so locked in the system that the needing more and achieving more was gotten through more of the system. So to want more is to, of course, obviously need to use more, right? It's a very maximalist thing, right? Like one of my favorite composers, Mahler, had an issue with this in his early career as well, where he had the same kind of yearning Coltrane had, and he thought he could fulfill that with more symphony. Just huge. And the stuff is incredible, but like his later work is even more incredible because of how like minutely triple pianissimo, delicate long phrases. You can hear the vaporous trailings of angel wings from some of his later pieces. And Coltrane had the same realization. Where he's like later record with Rashid Ali, drums and saxophone with no songs at all. Now, that's plagued a little bit by the 1960s kind of avant-garde jazz. A lot of those guys kind of went a little too far with some of that stuff. But nonetheless, it's a complete breakdown of all those systems into just looking, searching, discovering. Now, we don't have to go that far, because again, that's music nobody wants to listen to, right? Because that's not, like, Interstellar Space is a cool record for me to listen to, but like, no one wants to check that out. I'm not gonna, if I were to put that on for my family while we're having dinner or something, 5 seconds and my wife is gonna kill somebody. It's just no one without the kind of theoretical knowledge or the schooling in it is ever gonna seek that out. It's a different kind of music. But we can use the same kind of process to play anything, to play a 50s pop ballad, to play a heavy metal tune, to play whatever. The point is to say the knowledge of the fretboard is using the strings on the fretboard to an external end. And that external end is always the song that you're playing. And if you think about the fretboard that way, you can't play anything other than wonderful music, because you're always thinking about the entity outside of yourself. You're always thinking about the thing that needs you in it, Not about, how can I, it's like, think of a relationship. Like if the relationship is all about you and how can I subvert and suborn all these people to my will, to my whims, right? Like imagine if you had, for those of you that are parents, if you did that to your kids, that's how you create fucked up adults, frankly. You're constantly suborning people to your will. Not like, who is this person? Do they want to be a drummer or a stock investor? Maybe they want to be like a ballet dancer or something. Maybe I'm not asking enough questions about what they are and who they are and what they want. And when you start doing that, well, there's a flourishing human life right there. If you just meet everybody in the world asking yourself, what does this person need from me? Not what do I want them to do? That's step one toward a life of virtue, right? And so music needing to be a mirror of life. Step number one toward becoming a musician, that it can actually move both yourself and other people, because there's both facets of that equation are really important. The first thing you got to do is think about the song and what how the fretboard can help you do that, right? So let me actually tune up my guitar here, Luke. Can you just talk for 30 seconds so I can get a quick tune?
This might be a nice opportunity for me to mention that we've just launched our Patreon. So this is being recorded for our podcast, Principles of Music, which we've got about 7 episodes out now. The podcast goes out free on all streaming platforms. You can get it on the Apple Podcast app and anywhere you like to get your podcasts. And it's just called Principles of Music. And we've just launched our Patreon, which I will put in the chat, where you can actually get all kinds of bonuses. Like you can watch the videos of the podcast. So whenever Bryan plays something, you can watch what he plays. I actually just find it more entertaining to watch it anyway than just listening. And you can also get some exclusive content. We've got some transcriptions going up from some of Bryan's solos. We'll do more live stream events like this, and you guys can submit questions and tune in for the live stream events. So I'll be posting a link for that in the chats.
Perfectly timed.
Bryan.
There you go. Wow. So, again, let's there's almost like a necessity, and I'm glad, Hank, I'm glad you kind of started us down this road, because I wasn't going to go this way with it, but this is a great way to go, I think. There's almost like, try to think about every song you're playing, whether it's something you wrote or something someone else wrote, like almost with the feeling of love. Try to approach the song like it actually is a being that exists, and that it's your responsibility to sort of cherish it like a thing that exists. And this could be like, if it's the darkest, heaviest metal thing possible, still someone brought this thing to fruition that was previously non-existent, and now it's your obligation, responsibility, job, role, duty, take your pick, to make it either as good as it currently is or better than it is, but not detract from what it is. And I think if you look at, let's take this just stay in C, or even let's do like a little funk thing. Let's say we're just grooving on that, right? And someone says, all right, man, lay down something cool for me. Now, all of us are going to be, firstly, we're going right there. We're going right there to the 8th fret, that's for sure. Because that's where the riff starts, and that's where the position is, and that's where the pentatonic scale is. And my point is, stop that. Try to if you can. And that isn't to say that you should never do it, but try again. Try to think skeptically about first doing that. Stop the autopilot, stop the auto movement, and ask yourself first, what is this? Right? Thing more open. Not so like that. There's some position stuff in there. There's some scalar stuff in there, sure. But the first priority of that is to think about the riff. And then how can I, again, thinking externally, how can I use the fretboard to serve that thing? And that would be similar if the riff was like... Let's say that's your riff. Now, how would you use fretboard knowledge to heighten that, right? Now, the first thing to do, people would think, go Holdsworth, go like max content. 1, 2, 3. That sort of shit. But the answer to that is an overwhelming no, because if that's your riff is that syncopated, that dense, that harmonically polyrhythmic. The last thing in the fucking world you want to do is add to that. Because it becomes nonsense. The riff becomes nonsense because by adding more content to it, you decontextualize it. And so then you're just, now it's noise. Whereas if your solo were to be 1, 2, 3, something rhythmic, right? That's adding to the syncopation, or 1, 2, 3, doing. Something like that, or even more open. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. Something like that, right? Where you're using the syncopation, you're using the kind of disjointed nature of the polyrhythmic aspect of it to do your own over-the-bar line phrasing, but that isn't getting in the way. So you have a choice. Something like that. Where you're mirroring the syncopation, but not with like just nonsense content, or more cooler, I think. 1, 2, 3, something that floats entirely over the thing, right? Like Frederick from Meshuggah is great at this, but they have some mad riff, and then his solo will just be like gayo he hi. freeze, or just kind of like some out of time, free flowing rubato thing on top of it. Because that's, of course, again, like, if there's no balance, it's pointless. So something can be heavy and cool and interesting and poppy. The song style doesn't matter. Your question has to be, what can I do that makes this thing better? And then how can I use the fretboard knowledge that I have to do that? The answer to that is almost never going to be, I'm going to play a scale position. The scale position being the correct answer is really only like if you're playing like a Baroque etude, and you're you're not going to play that very often, if ever. So, trying to think about how you would get out of this is something that needs to be considered. I can't really offer the answer for every individual person, because it's going to be different for every one of you guys. Because your sensibilities, this is one of the things that the Google mapification of this situation does, is that it makes all of us that and all of you and all of us that would suffer from this problem kind of complicit in the same mapification of our musical world, right? So you and I and everyone else can know how to get to Grandma's house with Google Maps, because we've all chosen the same knowledge system to get to Grandma's house. But in doing so, none of us are ourselves, really. We're just things that listen to another thing. And the way that we would, like, my dream world would be like, some people climb over houses, some people ride their bikes around the trail around the neighborhood, some people like jump fences, some people, like, everyone's got they just have, I know where it is. I'm going to do my thing to get there, because I like to jog or to run or to take this street to come back, and then do this street 5 times in a row and then go around. Like, I have my thing, and I do my thing, and I get around as I see fit. Because if you're not thinking creatively as yourself, you're not thinking creatively. You're just kind of thinking for the sake of being a thinking machine, to kind of prove it to yourself that you can, or something. Like, ooh, I know all the positions of G major. So what? Like that great, good job. A chimp could do that. That's not anything to know. I mean, it's like a monkey can paint, so a monkey can surely learn G major. I'm sure if the chimp tried hard enough, or orangutan or something. Like, this is not. You're putting your finger in places that someone tells you to put it. That's not anything. And so to say, like, fretboard, you got to get more fretboard knowledge. And what someone means by that is you need to put your fingers on the holes. It's like, that isn't even knowledge. That's not even what knowledge means. Because if knowledge is step 1 toward wisdom, would you ever gain wisdom by knowing all the shapes? Because, it's important to realize, guys, that, like, a lot of guitarists throughout the world know where the positions of the scales are, because you can easily access that information. It's not that hard to learn. But how many guitarists are good? Right? If knowing your fretboard was like some step 1 toward, mastery, we'd have a lot of masters of guitar out there. And we don't. We do have a lot of people who know where the G major is. But that's not really, like I said, that's not a thing. Now, knowing how to use G major is a different thing. And oftentimes the best way to use G major is... That's G major. Okay. If someone says, "What does G major sound like?" What is it? That's it. Not. That is nothing. That doesn't mean anything, right? So, yes, you need to know where the notes literally, physically are on the fretboard. But that's not what we're talking about here today, because frankly, you can buy any fucking Hal Leonard book for $12 on Amazon, knock that shit out in no time. So that's not even the thing to do. I'm not going to be like, oh, here's the thing. Good, great. No, I should be able to say,
one sec. We'll overdub that. You've got to go. You can buy any Guitar Vivo book.
Yeah. There you go. Any Guitar Vivo book.
I just wanted to, just before you move on from that previous point though, because you kind of said it 20 minutes ago as well, and I just want to make it kind of clear for people that might not even be ready for what you're talking about now, but a good kind of litmus test for what you're talking about as it being a thinking problem, and about how knowing more positions doesn't by default make you a master. We see that every day when we see people that traverse the whole neck. They play all over the place, but what they've done is they've taken one position, they've taken the musical sequences and things like that, and they've just moved that all over the fretboard. And they think that's freedom, which is kind of it's the opposite of freedom. Like, I can do this one thing, like and now I can do that all over the place. It's that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, that's like the warden giving you like, you can run around the whole prison yard if you want. Like, you're a special prisoner, and so you can go from one end of the fence to the other end of the fence. The other guys have to stay in the wait spot. But you're the enlightened prisoner. You can go, and you're free, right? Like, oh, my bird's in a bigger cage. And the bird says, now I'm free because I can flap my wings and I can be in this, but you're in a fucking cage. Yes, that's a kind of freedom, but it's not really the thing. And I mean, that's, I mean, pianists have this problem too, and it's the fact that a technological system, and again, this scale positions are a kind of, in the Greek sense, are a kind of techne. The Greeks use the word techne, which we get technological and technology from, to mean like, it's a human created problem solving device. To be technical is to solve problems in human device terms. And scale positions are definitely a kind of techne. It says, here's a problem. Music is crazy and strange and weird and unknowable and odd and specific and individual, culturally and personally and ethnographically, and it's just, it's too crazy. Let's just lock it up with this techne. And like any technology, like Google Maps, you suborn yourself to it for comfort. And so it's incredibly comfortable to like just rail on those positions, man. Yes, that's it, because you have the comfort both of not having to think, which is of course comfortable, and you also have the comfort of feeling like you are not doing what you're actually doing, which is just phoning it in. And you have the ego boost of like being a master because you can do this techne thing, right? And as someone who has a lot of techne and has had a lot of techne for a long time, I can tell you that techne is not a thing. Again, it's like physical action is primate behavior. Just because you can do something with your hands physically I'm not impressed by that at all. Like, I just don't care about that. That's not impressive to me. The thing that makes human beings, and then artists vis-a-vis human beings, exceptional is that we can take techne and do something that other people can't even conceive of, right? There's a great quote by Schopenhauer that says, the talented man hits a bullseye very far away. The creative man, the genius, hits a bullseye no one can see. Right? So techne is like, you just practice, hit that fucking bullseye. LeBron James, like free throws, whatever, right? But a genius and a creative person is not even aiming at the same thing. There's a whole nother thing that person, only they see, right? And techne has nothing to do with that. And I think as guitarists, and predominantly men, we have a real Achilles heel for because techne is cool. It's just fucking cool to see somebody just blaze, melt faces. It's cool. I myself enjoy doing it, so I understand why it's cool to watch. But when I do it, I'm doing it similar to you know, I don't know, maybe you like, I don't watch TV, but maybe you watch TV and when you like watch The Bachelorette, you know you're doing something dumb. Or when you're watching like, the third Avengers movie, you're like, I mean, you know this is not like art, right? But it's entertaining, you enjoy it, great, right? Or you're reading, like you're into like the Jack Reacher books or something. You have like, or like you like to read Tom Clancy, whatever. Like when you're reading Tom Clancy, you're not fooling yourself that you're like reading Dostoevsky. But it also can be enjoyable and you can dig it and it's a pleasurable experience. But like any kind of quote unquote guilty pleasure, you got to do it in moderation. Otherwise, it becomes who you are. So I'll occasionally do it. I mean, I've been guilty of it. Go on YouTube. You can find these things. But as I've gotten older specifically and understood more about music and my role as a musician and a creative person in the world, I try to do that only when like primate behavior is actually a net positive for the audience. So like if everything's getting so hot and so intense and so crazy that I can't really even make a musical choice that is even like intelligible. The only thing I can do is just go to animal mode. And that's the best choice in that situation. Again, that's playing the external song correctly. That's saying, I couldn't even do anything here that's just only noise works now. And then it's time to play noise. And that's cool. Or it's time, only like walls of sheets of notes work now because everything's so fast and so kinetic. And it wouldn't even matter if I played anything beautiful or anything interesting. Or it's all lost in the sound anyway. I just need to like over-dominate this situation, just pummel it to death. That's still looking externally, and that's the correct choice to make. But when I'm doing that, I'm thinking like, it's very like, Venice Beach kind of like, it's very, very ego based. And so I'm always thinking to myself, I'm ready. I'm looking forward to this being over because I don't love doing this, right? Because it's fulfilling a physical limbic purpose. It's not filling a transcendent purpose, which again is the purpose of music. All you guys out there play music and are musicians because of transcendence, not because you think it's cool to play fast. Even if that's the reason why you think you play, it isn't the reason why you play. No one picks up the guitar because they want to just play fast. They pick up the guitar because they want to achieve something through that. And the thing you're trying to achieve is the transcendence of your body. And helping other people to do that too by listening to you. And these techne, these systems, these positions, these things, these objects hold us back from that goal. Because they just, they lock you into the ground. They bolt your feet to the earth. So I think that's probably a good synopsis of the basic philosophy. And then we can maybe start taking some questions, start fielding some stuff. And,
yeah, guys, so if you've got any questions, let me know. I'm on to the chats now. I'll update the YouTube one, see what's going on there. Guys on Zoom, if you've got any questions. I just want to kind of recap what we've said. So from my experience, what I did, my path was I learned I bought into this cage shape stuff and then went, right, so ironically, the cage system, 5 positions that cover the whole fretboard. Then I still thought, right, I need something else because this isn't working for me. So I learned 3-note per string scales, and then I was like, right, I need more because more is better. Then I started doing like weird 4-note per string stuff, and then you start doing like, well, I may as well just start tapping now and see if I can do 8 on this string. Right. In reality, the problem was right at the start. The moment I had something, I should have been changing my impetus for like where I was trying to make music come from, because it seems like I was trying to make it come from the shape and the path that was given to me. Is that the mistake?
Absolutely. And that's similar to like how our culture looks at drugs, right? Where you have a problem, psychological, physical, whatever it is, and the answer is always external technique, right? Let me take a pill. It must be some kind of imbalance, and I need to correct it with an antidepressant or with a huge cocktail of this stuff. And it's like we're all just like this big cosmic gas tank, and we've always got to keep our levels balanced out or something, right? And no one thinks to themselves, oh, I feel this. Maybe my life is the problem. Maybe my choices are the problem. Maybe the whole my existence is the issue. I need to fix the foundation problem first, and not just constantly band-aid it with more technique. So like, you know, you're sitting there with the guitar saying, God, I don't feel inspired. And your solution is like drugs, basically, like musical drugs, like another thing, another object, another, well, maybe this drug will work. Maybe this vitamin supplement will help me. Maybe this thing, you know, instead of like, well, maybe I'm thinking wrong. You know, maybe I'm not like thinking about what this is correctly. Whereas just because the guitar is a physical thing, yes, I don't have to be overly tied down to its physicality though. You know, by learning more and more positions, you're more and more physically oriented to the physical thing. But instruments are physical things to make abstraction. Music is not physical, especially now that no one buys like records. It's even more abstract. These are just physical manifestations or physical vehicles with which to manifest the non-physical world. So if you get too tied down in all the physical ways to make something happen, you're going to get, you know, it's as I always talk about, it's the artist-craftsman distinction. You know, I'm trying to make artists, and if you're not careful, you become a craftsman, which is fine. But craftsmen, they don't innovate. They recreate, right? So like, if you want to be in a Milli Vanilli cover band that plays at casinos, you know, focus on the physical. Learn all the tunes, nail the exact phrases perfectly, like get everything down perfectly. But if you want to like write music and move people with your music you've written, you gotta get out of the physical realm. And the problem, this is why singer-songwriters are, you know, there's an issue. The more music you learn, the harder this is to remember. Which is why singer-songwriters hit people so hard, because they don't even fucking care about the physical at all. You know, like Bob Dylan could barely and can barely play the guitar. But he's not even trying to play. That's the whole point. You know, like I love Jason Isbell, this dude from Nashville. And like, you know, he can play a bit, but like he's not overly concerned with like his chops, because he's overly concerned with songwriting, with creating a piece of art that takes people somewhere. So if he got too mired in like, you know, whether or not he's playing his Lydian sharp 11 shit correctly on the fourth bar of the B section, he wouldn't be concerned. He would stop thinking, I wonder if people even like this, are moved by this, are interested in this, right? Because you get, the more physicality you get into, the more material your world becomes, the less transcendence comes in, and then you just become a craftsman. And then it's, you know, the Led Zeppelin cover band. It's a one-way street to the casino route. And that's, I mean, I know some guys who do that gig and they make good money. So it isn't even to say you shouldn't do that. It's just to say that that's not art. That's a different thing. That's a different thing. That's craftsman work. And there are so many avenues for you to seek out if that's something that interests you. Like, I don't make any judgments. If that's how you want to live, please do. And there are so many ways to find ways of doing that better. That we don't even deal with that here because there's no point. Yeah.
Got a couple of questions here. So, well, actually, first of all, I can't answer, but I can deflect one slightly. Is it Roger has asked? Let me get this name right. Roger's asked, where does timbre fall in the hierarchy of musical elements? I'll just remind you, we do have an episode on sound that is out, and you can go listen to it, where I think it's like 2 hours just on the philosophy of timbre and sound and all that stuff. But we'll take that question here as well. So where does timbre fall in the hierarchy of musical elements?
It falls. It's, I mean, you know, I think you could even make the case that rhythm, melody, and timbre are the entire trinity, so to speak. That scales really don't even matter at all. If you know, let's say you're in A minor, and you know just 3 notes, but you're so concerned with focusing on elements of those 3 notes, you can make a wonderful musical phrase. that sounds like a medieval Gregorian chant or something. So, I mean, hugely effective. And if you've got let's say you've got even like a one note groove. So much with that, right? So timbre and dynamics also are kind of bedfellows as well. I think in that sound episode we went into that as well, or we did in another episode maybe. But yeah, they're crucially important. And again, the reason why we're trying to break out of the mainframe of this position tyranny is because, does Roger ask this question?
Yeah.
Because Roger, what happens when you stop thinking about positions, man? You start thinking about the other stuff. That's the whole point here, right? Once the warden just opens the gate and says, yeah, if you want, you can kind of walk out there a little bit if you want, and you start doing it, you start thinking outside the walls naturally. You see the trees and the birds and the sounds and the restaurants and you see it all, and now the options exist, and now the walls are prisons and not a home. So. Yes, Roger. Timbre is incredibly important. So is dynamics. So is rhythm. So is phrasing. So is everything else that isn't the scale position. And all of those things need to be played on the fretboard. So if there's a philosophy of the fretboard, so to speak, the philosophy is, how can I play what needs to be played for this song as efficiently and easily as possible, right? Because the thing about the fretboard that we're always thinking about is there's almost a kind of like practicality aspect that is lost in it. And we have this bias of like, well, the good thing has to be the hard thing. Again, we go back to that difficulty kind of fetish, right? When like the first question should be, where's the path of least resistance here, man? Like when you have for those of you guys that like have homes and own your house or whatever, or even if you have an apartment, you'll know that like if you have a water leak, or maybe you're a plumber, maybe you do construction, you know that like when water leaks, water finds a route always. Look at a mountainside, and you'll say, "Oh, look at all those trails." Most of those trails aren't trails; they're gravity flows of water from rainfall, because water always finds a way, and water never chooses the obstructed way. It always goes right on around those rocks, and it'll always find the spot in your cabinets that have the hole in it, and it'll drip down to another spot, and that water will drip down. It will find a way, and it's always the path of least resistance. So we should be asking ourselves, what's the most musical thing that I can play that involves the least resistance? And that might be the hardest thing to play, maybe, because the song you're playing might be really difficult, really intense, really nuts. Or it might mean that you've got to just dig in fully to your blues thing. You've got you just got to like eat dirt. Okay, but maybe it's maybe that's it also. Maybe your entire solo, your entire gig, your entire album, your entire life is nothing but just simple, perfect things, right? There are Greek Parthenons, and then there are Japanese gardens. Which one's more beautiful? That's a hard one. That's an aesthetic question at that point. And maybe you're a Japanese gardener, or maybe you're a Greek warrior. Who knows? You got to ask yourself that. No one will know what they are musically if we're all doing the same Google Maps routine, though. If we're all just, how can you have your pudding if you don't have your meat, right? Like, we don't need no education, you know what I mean? If we're all just doing that route, then how will we ever, like, we won't. We're just going to be like, C major means C major scale, and B flat major means B flat major scale, and that means G minor too if I wanted to, and not gonna work, man.
This also opens up that other kind of overlooked thing of how the fretboard controls your sound. Where you are on the fretboard controls the potential of what you can play, how you can inflect.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And how many of us are making or are using that as our deciding factor for where we play stuff or how we play stuff, where we go to from here, which I think you kind of hinted at earlier, but I wanted to make sure we overtly stated.
Yeah, we use that same C thing, and if imagine you take someone says, play me a solo, dude, go C minor, 1, 2, 3, and you just live up here. Whatever, right? No one makes that choice because no one thinks to make it. If you're the first guy that shows up to the gig and says 1, 2, 3, go, dude. I assure you, people are going to say, who are you, where are you from, what's your number? If for no other reason, like, who's this alien? Who doesn't do all the other stuff that everybody else is doing? And, it's important also to state now, before you guys go and run off and start working on this stuff, that we also don't want to fetishize novelty. So being different for the sake of being different is also not a thing to do. Just thinking about whether or not what you're doing is actually right is the thing to do. Because the fetishizing of the original is a very, that's a road that is fraught with issues as well, right? That's there's nothing to that. That's a Nietzsche thing. You just kind of go and be yourself by yourself when that happens. So again, if the answer is to be a Japanese gardener, and the tune you've got is if your tune is now, the conventional route is the right route here. A phrase like that is correct. So that isn't to say we're not shooting for weird. We're shooting for, if you're thinking about fretboard organization in a traditional scholastic kind of way, you wouldn't play this. That's just not a phrase. It wouldn't happen. That's a phrase that somebody who's not thinking that way plays, right? That's That's when someone says, "Oh, that's so tasty." Robin Ford, Mark Rebo, the tasty guys, Larry Carlton, all these guys, right? These are guys that are not. They don't live in the world of scale positions. Anything tasty, right? All the stuff on the Tom Waits records, or all that stuff on those Alison Krauss albums, or all the tasty, all the Nashville guys. They just don't think like this. They think in terms of melody, in terms of, again, water, path of least resistance. Because what's the benefit of more resistance? Unless what you're doing is a resistance-based art, right? So unless you're a metal guitarist, or you're doing stuff that is resistance-focused. And in that case, even then your fretboard knowledge is going to be is so much more rhythmic than harmonically oriented, that your resistance is coming from rhythmic phrasing, and even then that's not a fretboard knowledge question, right? You're getting the most out of two notes. That's a whole different element, but fretboard knowledge still doesn't come into that. Then it's still the elements. I mean, this podcast is called Principles of Music for a reason, because it's always focused on underlying principles, not on the artifice, not on the sprinkles on top, but on the ice cream, and more importantly on the milk, and more importantly on the cow, and then on the grass. It's always going down to what you can't have good ice cream without good grass. You can't have without good milk, and you can't have good milk without good cows. You can't have good cows without good grass, right? So we say we don't want to focus on the sprinkles on top, but what we want to focus on is the grass the cows eat. You got to without source foundation, kind of tillage. You had that problem, Luke, right? You're always trying to put new sprinkles on things. And you're just not nourished by sprinkles because it's not food. You gotta go down further into the ground to get the shit out of there. So, you got any more questions?
Yeah. The Gabagool has asked, "Is it
the Gabagool? Hey. All right.
Is it possible that giant steps exist as a bar to achieve, and then to ask yourself, where do I want to go from here?"
Yeah, I mean. So, I think that something about modernity that we don't pay enough attention to is that the things that we engage in have the potentiality, and in fact have almost a guarantee to stay with us, right? So I don't watch horror movies because I don't understand why I would want to see really dark imagery a lot. Right? Some people are into this sort of stuff. To me, it's I don't know why I would want to see decapitated people, or psychological thrill. I mean, again, I don't watch movies or TV at all anymore because I don't even see the point in that. But in the past, I even then was I couldn't see the point in how having that imagery in my mind forever was a good. Right? So, modern culture says, "Oh, that's just whatever. Get beyond that. Whatever. It's not a big deal. It's just pictures. It's just images." But is anything just anything? I mean, is it just an image? Is it just a picture? I mean, did our ancestors think that cave paintings were just pictures of cows? I mean, nothing's just anything. Nothing's just a picture. Everything has greater depth than we think it does, because we attribute very little depth to everything in our current world. So the answer to that question is double, kind of bifurcated. Firstly, music is not a gym workout. So if you want a bar, an unattainable goal to reach, write a piece of music that makes everyone that hears it cry. No, try to do that. That's a goal, right? If you want to have an accomplishment in your personal life, try to bench press 350 pounds. Separate them, right? And my goal today was to run up a mountain and down a mountain in 115 degrees in under an hour, which I did, but I almost puked, but nonetheless, I did it this morning. So that was my goal today. But I wouldn't bring that kind of thinking into the art realm. So I have personal goals, achieve them, knock them out, destroy them, move on with them, churn and burn, eat them like they're candy. Great. I'm all for accomplishment and achievement and goals. But we have to look at art differently. So if you want a very hard artistic thing to do, write a piece of music that is undeniably moving, and that everyone that hears it is moved by. That's much, much, much harder than learning a bunch of scales over a bunch of chords. So that's that thing. That's my opinion on that. I don't think anybody needs to learn giant steps. I don't think it's necessary. I could just write for you now a bunch of unrelated or secondarily dominant related harmonic chords and give you that as an exercise, and you could just shed that if you wanted to, and that would be valid as a practice thing. But giant steps, the summit of giant steps, has become a totemic god that it's a false god. It does not belong in the shrine. Its idols need to be destroyed on the ground. It does not deserve the worship that it's received. Coltrane is a deep dude and deserves a lot of the respect he gets. But I assure you that Coltrane, even when he was alive in his later period, would look, that was not something he was proud of. That's a transitional moment to a different thing. The Coltrane of Live at the Village Vanguard, those Eric Dolphy recordings, is a very different Coltrane than the Giant Steps era. So, that's that. And secondly, even if you were to achieve it, like I said earlier, with things lingering in you, what would stay with you is the very thing we're trying to undo in this discussion, which is like, if you were to master Giant Steps, you would master techne. That's what you would master. And once you master techne lives in you. Just like once you see the movie of the mass rape and the decapitation of hundreds of people or whatever, like that's a thing you now have. And most people in the past that were a little more psychologically level-headed than we are, they didn't have the ability to see images like that. And so they didn't have this stuff stay with them, and consequently, like, they weren't on cocktails of drugs to not have anxiety attacks at work, because they didn't have all this stuff in their minds, right? And so if you want to stay your musical pursuits to be pure, I guess, in my interpretation. Now, again, if you want to be a techne monster craftsman guitar player, and you want your thing to be techne, again, I have no judgments about that. Then in that case, blaze away, man. But you kind of make a deal with the devil when you do that. Because once you go down the road of techne fully, that is who you are. It's like, you have to kind of like, this town ain't big enough for the both of us, right? Like, there's a shootout at the OK Corral, and the creative or the techne has to survive that shootout. They can't both stay in the town. And so you can decide, you can put your finger on the scale and decide which one wins that shootout, for sure. But just like you can't bemoan the loss of the other member when you need him back or want him back, because you'll be it's like that it's not the good, the bad, the ugly, right? There's not 3 guys in the round, and one of them doesn't have bullets, right? It's 2. It's fistful of dollars. No, it's a few dollars more, right? You got Lee Van Cleef, Captain Mortimer, and you've got Indio, I think is his character's name in that movie. They're shooting. It's a shootout. No judgment. Again, it's your Western, right? It's your town. You're the sheriff of this town. You can decide who gets to have the run of the place. But there's like no second life. There's no resurrection, because the amount of time that it will take, and the amount of dedication and philosophical heft and attention that techne mastery takes. I mean, I am thankful and grateful that I did all of my techne mastery when I was so young that I was almost like too stupid to know what I was doing. Like I was like 12, 13. I was just a dumb kid. And so none of it was really even going in like deeper than just like it was no different than like learning how to hit a baseball or like learning how to kick a soccer ball or something. It was just muscle memory. But if you're an adult, your brain is awake. And so this stuff will linger. You will have to have a shootout, and one will have to survive. So you make a choice, man. It's your music, your life.
Awesome. I think that hits all of our questions.
Cool.
I'll do one last search. I'll refresh that page, guys. Anyone on Zoom? But other than that, would just like to thank everyone for tuning in. Yeah, Bryan, do you want to say anything in closing?
No. Yeah, just the usual stuff. You know, the podcast goes into a lot of this stuff as well. We're going to be doing more regular releases. We've got we're going to start doing like a sub-weekly sort of secondary series in the podcast where I kind of go through some music that I'm listening to currently and talk about it and play excerpts from the music that I'm digging. And so it'd be a good opportunity for you guys to check out some new music that you're not maybe aware of or haven't listened to. Yeah, man, just, you know, write us, support us if you feel like you want to, and, you know, just enjoy, practice, live, love, all that.
I'll just read this last comment here. Rodney Crowell was frustrated about writing hits or writing meaningful songs. Guy Clark told him to decide. You want to be a star or an artist?
Yeah.
Right.
And you know, guys, like let's be real here too. Again, like what I said, there's no judgment about this stuff. We're talking about you know, I mean, there's art requires the 3 S's, right? Sacrifice, solitude, suffering. And if that doesn't sound good to you, you can be a craftsman. Like it's not like there's no judgment here. It isn't like it's just a question of attainment, and also a question of why you're doing what you're doing, right? Like the history doesn't tend to remember craftsmen. It does tend to remember artists. But you have to do the 3 S's if you're going to do the art thing. And the craftsman can oftentimes, like, you know, you give the market what it wants. And the market says, I want an auto-tuned, you know, backbeated sort of like, yabba habba hubba ha, habba hubba ha, habba, something like that. It sounds like that. Then you craftsman knock that thing out and you put some stuff on it and, like, you know, market digs it, you get some money, you're ready to roll. But you're kind of like PepsiCo at that point. You know, and again, no judgment. If you want to make money and you want to like kick back and, you know, do quaaludes with porn stars or something, then like, you know, that's a choice you can make. Yeah, solitude, silence, suffering. Solitude. It's 3 S's. Or solitude, suffering, and I'm forgetting.
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice.
I was really hoping there was a different S, but.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's just, you know, it is what it is, man. I don't think you can have art as defined by, and again, you know, I'm defining art in high art terms. I'm defining art in like rarefied terms, and I think it needs to live there because otherwise it's just commodity creation, right? And we have enough of that. Go on Amazon, man. You know, like the one thing you can't find on Amazon is creative emotional movement, right? Like you can find everything else, but what you can't find is the thing that art can do. You can buy kitsch and like kind of art, but you can't actually like, it's not there. It doesn't live there because it's not a commodity. You have to experience that, and you have to have someone willing to do the 3 S's to give it to you. And so that's a larger discussion beyond fretboard stuff.
Yeah, I will just say, if you're into what Bryan's just been speaking about, episode 1 and episode 2. Episode 1 is about technique, is what we titled the philosophy of technique, and that goes into a lot of this craftsman versus artist kind of stuff. And episode 2 is on artistry, which is kind of what you're talking about now, which is another. Because I don't talk that much, I'm allowed to like brag, right? I can say they're great episodes.
Yeah, sure, yeah, you can do that. Yeah, so you know this is what we're presented with as creative people, and it's been what we present. I mean, look, my bookshelves back here are like this entire row is just musician history, just music history, all this, and all those books, just composer biographies and analyses of works and music history stuff. Because, it's important to understand that as musicians, we are part of a chronological chain of events that has a means, no, an end to it, a telos. It has a reason for existing. And that reason, I mean, guys, like, the more music history you study, the more you realize that for every Mozart, there are just countless hordes of people you'll never hear about. But when Mozart was alive, like Von Hall and all these guys were like known and successful and popular, and Salieri and all these people, right? You've seen Amadeus, like, they're doing well, they're like noted, and everyone thinks they're wonderful. But history chews them up and turns them to dust because they're not artists. And that isn't, I'm a rarefied guy. I'm an idealist, right? So I'm always going to think that's what we should all be striving for. We should all be striving for absolute pinnacle stuff because everything else is not worth it. But I also see the more practical point of, like, to my earlier point about water, the idealist position is the path of most resistance. Because the path of least resistance is just whatever works in the market works. And the problem with that, though, is that you're not really fulfilling the teleology of what art is supposed to do, which is last and give guys, like, if you spend more than 5 seconds thinking about existence writ large, you'll come to the conclusion that it's pretty hard, right? There's a lot of, like, unknowables, a lot of entropy, a lot of tragedy, a lot of, like, it's hard to do the life thing. And there are things that exist that help us to contextualize it, transcend it, and kind of give a narrative to what it is for ourselves. And art is like the number one thing that can do that for the creative person and for the person experiencing it. And so, it's my goal to help everyone to realize that more. And you can do that with your guitar, just saying, I'm going to play C major, but not think about the scale. And I'm going to try to make beauty happen here, right? And I'll leave you guys with this one thought, which is that, we talk a lot about beauty, things are beautiful, things need to be beautiful and whatever. But the reason why music has a role to play and such a responsibility in the realm of beauty is because beauty is the physical representation of the sensation of home in the world. So imagine you're at your mom and dad's house and everything's right. Your mom and dad are healthy. It's Christmas morning. The cookies are fresh. You feel good. They feel good. The eggnog is good. The presents are out, it's snowing outside, just like a home, right? Dickens, like the ultimate Dickensian hearth sensation. And maybe that's not your concept of home, but whatever it is, we all have it. The thing that if you woke up in the morning, you would feel total peace and serenity, whatever that feeling is, right? Home is what usually produces that for people. And the outside world, it doesn't have any of that. Right? The outside world is totally is without dwelling, as Heidegger would say. It has no homeness. It's just fighting for that sensation, fighting against the opposite of that sensation, fighting to find that sensation in other people, experiences, places, things, always looking for home. But what beauty does is beauty, no matter where it is, no matter it's the light hitting a window on a building in a city at the right moment, or it's a mountaintop, or it's a sunset, or it's a woman or a man, or just aesthetics. The right moment of beauty is basically is homeness coming into the external world and into your existence, so that in the external world you can feel that sensation of grounded peace, of home. And that's what beauty does. That's why it's so important. And we as artists can give that to people. And especially in the technological age, we can give that to people out in the world. It used to be you used to go see a show to get that, or stumble upon someone playing music to get that sensation. We can actually give people a sensation of home now when they're in their world, which is fraught with all the things the world is fraught with. Which is why I'm always talking about music as a vocation, not as a profession. we have an important role to play, and that is we are connoisseurs, purveyors, and we are like devotees of beauty. That's the whole thing. And so all these things, fretboards and positions and scales, it's all subservient to that end. And if we get too mired in the material, if we let the material win the OK Corral shootout, we lose that entire narrative entirely. And then we just become tinkerers, You're the guy with it's like stooped over the table by himself, like hammering like something, like this. You're the lab guy, right? And not the vocational soul. So think about this stuff, guys. And it's so easy to get started. Pick up your guitar and just try not to think about all the things you need to think about. And tell yourself, look, I know these positions. So let me just where's the beauty? Show it to me. And I think we're doing a podcast in a little bit about like some when I say show it to me, what I mean by that. Because music will show itself to you. Once, like Hank, I think Hank or Roger, one of those guys said, once the scale prison has been escaped, now it's like, anything can talk to you also. Inside the prison, there's no communications. You can't take a phone call. It's all prohibited. Once you leave the prison, now you can receive communication as well. And so music can now actually speak to you because you're open to be spoken to, because you're not hunched over the table hammering away your craft. You can now, and we'll talk about this. I think we're doing one about this in a couple of weeks, but it's right there in front of you. All the things you'll ever play and have ever played and will ever play are already in the air, waiting to be picked up by you. But not if you're hunched over with the chisel. Can't be done. So thanks for coming and doing this, guys. Appreciate all the questions and the input and everything. Hope you guys got something from it, and see you next time.
Thank you so much, Bryan. Guys, if you want to watch the replay of this, you will get sent that link to guitarvivo.com/fret and then the number 1. So the replay will be up there. You can go to YouTube and watch it on there. If you want to check out more episodes, you can see them. We got those ones on artistry, sound, rhythm. I know a lot of you guys bought Ross Campbell's book. Bryan and I did an episode on blues, which is, I think, essential listening for anyone, especially those trying to learn in the digital age and, just being shown all these theory lessons online, all that kind of stuff. Check out the episode on the blues. And yeah, you can watch the videos for the episodes on our Patreon, which is patreon.com/Principles of Music podcast. Right, I'm going to breathe. Thank you so much, Bryan. That was great. Thank you everyone for tuning in, guys on YouTube, guys who joined us on Zoom. If you want to email us, it is principles@guitarvivo.com, and we will see you all next time.